Ayes have it. Clerk.
Government business orders of the day. Number 4, Telecommunications Legislation Amendment Competition and Consumer Bill 2018 and a related bill. Second reading debate. Resumption.
Senator Urquhart in continuation.
Thank you, Madam Mr Acting Deputy President. Sorry about that. I continue my remarks after question time interrupted me last week. Well, what a week we've had, in more ways than one. We had former Minister Fifield, Mr Morrow, Mr Rue and even Mr Turnbull complete an almighty backflip. And despite Mr Rue's gaffe, the board of the NBN Co, with the blessing of the government, appointed him as the next CEO of the NBN Co. Less than a day after NBN Co let the cat out of the bag that it had a plan to charge regional telecommunication users $20 more to access broadband than consumers in the city, the then Communications Minister, Senator Fifield, made a humiliating retreat. Last Wednesday evening, the NBN CFO, Mr Rue, revealed plans to charge regional customers $20 a month more than 50 megabytes per second plan than what a customer in the city would pay. On Thursday morning, the NBN Co's Tasmanian spokesperson, Mr Russell Kelly, doubled down on the position during an ABC Hobart radio interview. Mr Kelly was asked, and I quote, "Is it fair that customers who just, by I guess where they live, have to pay more for a service that's available in the city?" Mr Kelly responded, "Well, this is one of the realities of the internet." One of the realities of the internet? What galling language! This is from the NBN Co that crows about how Tasmania is the first state to be connected, when we know that there are hundreds of homes across the state, families and small businesses on the edge of towns that are waiting at least until the end of this year to get connected. Instead of working through the issue with the community, with their end users, NBN Co simply says it's a reality that for people in the bush they need to pay more. Labor quickly signalled that we would not have a bar of that. Minutes after the press conference, our Shadow Ministers for Communications, Ms Rowland and Mr Jones, held a media conference calling on the government to intervene. We called on the National Party, Senator McKenzie as the Minister for Regional Communications, Senator Martin as one Conservative senator who supports a full fibre NBN, to stand up to the Liberals and to stand up to NBN Co and demand that the regions get a fair go. Later that day, the capitulation was on, with the embarrassed former Minister Fifield declaring that NBN Co would engage in, and I quote, a fresh round of product consultations. I'm sure we can all predict what regional consumers would have told NBN Co during those consultations, except it's now been revealed that those consultations are a mirage, a smokescreen, or as Senator Cash might phrase it, a whiteboard. The respected communications industry online news website itnews.com.au included an updated report that the $20 slug on fixed wireless users was outlined at an industry briefing on Wednesday afternoon, a briefing that had been planned for at least a week. IT News reported that the new plans were presented along with the 3-year roadmap. The briefing went for 4 hours, after which NBN Co's Mr Rue, the CFO, and Mr Ryan, the Chief Engineer, fronted the parliamentary committee hearing. IT News reported that it understood the $65 price was presented to industry as a done deal. Industry were told on Wednesday afternoon they would be sent paperwork about the new framework. IT News also reported that the new $20 charge would begin from Monday, the 20th of August. That's today. Sorry, it's not today. It was back this Monday, just gone. The next day, the NBN Co's CEO tried to mop up the mess. He said that it wasn't a decision, that it wasn't a foregone conclusion that NBN Co would slug regional fixed wireless users $20 per month more for the same speed that their friends and colleagues in towns and cities on fixed lines were charged. It can't be both a done deal and a consultation. And if it was said to be a consultation, you have to ask why industry wasn't asked on Wednesday, rather they were told. Listeners can actually draw their own conclusions, but for me, this latest NBN debacle clearly suggests the minister has lost control over the NBN Co and that the NBN Co have lost understanding of what is actually palatable to consumers. NBN Co began virtually pretending there was no hearing of the Joint Standing Committee on the Wednesday night, that the CFO's comments had been a figment of everyone's imagination, and claiming no decision had been taken. They sought to wash the records, step back from their bungled admission and hide their secret charge. I understand the charge would have affected 9 out of 10 regional households on a fixed wireless network if they choose to order a 50 megabytes per second service. 9 out of 10. 584,000 premises across the country. Most of the time, with the NBN, I hear cases of individuals who are disadvantaged. This is a huge cohort of Australian households, businesses and families, and often it is potluck if you're on fixed wireless or fixed line. We've heard some shocking examples of people at the end of a street being assigned to fixed wireless, or whole new subdivisions being moved to fixed wireless instead of the NBN, and the developer rolling out fibre to the home within the development. This then creates congestion on the network, so we've got an inferior network that will cost people more than the alternative. No consideration for fairness, no consideration for equity of access, and a step that will only increase that digital divide between the city and the bush. But those lucky enough to live in a full fibre suburb and those nearby stuck on an inferior, more expensive fixed wireless service. The backdown is welcome in the short term, but what it exposes is the calamity that the NBN has become under Prime Minister Turnbull as Communications Minister and then as Prime Minister. A minister who has given the task of destroying the NBN is doing his very best to achieve Mr Abbott's task. It's ironic that this week, with the leadership speculation around energy policy, based on the differences between Mr Abbott and Mr Turnbull, that the government refuses to take a principled stance on the NBN, instead of doing what the country needed, and fighting Mr Abbott's wrecking ball against the NBN. What the government did was they capitulated and oversaw the crass politicisation of what should have been a bipartisan nation-building project. The NBN was manipulated, stretched, pushed and shoved into a model colloquially known as, by many as the multi-technology mess, a mess that contained the technology from 3 simple alternatives: fibre to the premise for 93% of the population and a mix of satellite and fixed wireless for the remainder, into a mishmash of fibre to the premise for the lucky, fibre to the curb for the somewhat unlucky, fibre to the node for the downright unlucky, fibre to the basement for those in apartment buildings and the like, overcrowded fixed wireless for many, many more that was originally predicted, including whole towns, and satellite for those in remote parts of the country, or for those who find themselves out of sight of a congested fixed wireless tower. Under Mr Turnbull, Mr Abbott and Senator Fifield, the NBN has gone from the key infrastructure bridging the divide between our cities and our regions to a rollout that divides neighbourhoods, incentivises freeloading, punishes the regions and prices regular consumers out of fast broadband. We had a charge last week that came about because we have a weak Liberal and National parties bitterly divided by infighting and personalities that are incapable of adequately representing rural and regional Australians at the Cabinet table. It is remarkable that we have a Cabinet Minister for Regional Communications that allowed this charge to be floated. What is the point of being in office if you can't represent regional Australians, the people you claim so often to be the champions of? Under Labor, we have a uniform wholesale pricing between the cities and the regions. The Prime Minister should not force regional Australians and regional businesses to pick up the bill for his mess. It is bad enough that they created a digital divide based on technology. Now he wants to create one based on price. And his rural and regional MPs and senators will sit by in complete silence if it was not for Labor, the charge would have been implemented from Monday the 20th of August. The problem is this Prime Minister cannot comprehend what $264 a year means to regional families. If he could, then he wouldn't allow it, but he has no idea. This is a policy decision permitted by a Prime Minister who is just so out of touch, and a government that is completely out of touch. We're not talking about a few hundred households or businesses either. The best estimate we have is that 584,000 premises will be affected by this charge, 4,000 in the Northern Territory, 40,000 in both Tasmania and Western Australia, 60,000 in South Australia, 125,000 in Queensland, 150,000 in Victoria, and even 160,000 in New South Wales. In every corner of this country, people on the urban fringe and in our rural communities will be impacted by this charge. A charge necessitated because under Prime Minister Turnbull we have a second-rate NBN that is $20 billion over budget and 4 years behind schedule. We've got a second-rate NBN that's over budget and out of control because we've got ministers and a Prime Minister who have no control over their own corporation. It is difficult to believe the minister had no idea what NBN Co were planning, especially given the duration and the consultation of these changes. Whoever the communications minister is should outline exactly what the government knew and when, and exactly what their office knew and when. Former Minister Cormann should outline what he knew and when, and what his office knew and when. Likewise, Minister Mackenzie, while not a shareholder minister of the NBN Co, is a minister within the communications portfolio whose constituents represent the vast number of people affected by these proposed changes. Each minister must outline what they knew, what their officers knew, and what they didn't do to stop NBN Co slugging fixed wireless users with a $20 a month charge. On this bill specifically, Labor has serious concern that this bill has been brought on to prop up the NBN corporate plan. The legislation has been conspicuously delayed for nearly 2 years. Just last week, this bill was brought on for debate with a new implementation date of the 1st of July 2019. The upcoming release of NBN Co's corporate plan might offer a clue as to why the dysfunctional Turnbull government is in a sudden rush to pass its $7.10 per month internet tax. It's because NBN Co is required to release its pre-election corporate plan before the end of August 2018. The corporate plan will contain forecasts out to financial year 2022, but it will not disclose the assumptions that underpin financial forecasts beyond that year. If the government passes its internet tax in August 2018, not only would the price increases come into effect in the next term of parliament, but it would permit the government in this term of parliament to add the revenue from this internet tax onto the NBN corporate plan from 2022 out to year 2040. If the legislation does not pass the parliament in August 2018, that is no longer possible. Should the legislation conveniently pass the Senate this week, we will have learned two things about the minister. One, his motivation was not about serving the broadband needs of regional Australia, but rather the pre-election NBN corporate plan. And two, he does not believe in his own policy, and that this is why the government delayed implementation of price increases until after the next election. All of this is being driven by a simple reality. Turnbull's second-rate NBN is $20 billion over budget and
Order.
4 years behind
Senator
schedule.
Urquhart.
It costs
Senator
more
Urquhart,
and does less.
I remind you to address the Prime Minister by his correct title.
The government should come clean about what they knew about the $20 charged on fixed wireless use. They should come clean about what other surprises are in their communications policy, and they should stop the secrecy about the NBN rollout.
Senator Linehelm.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. I rise to speak on the Telecommunications Legislation Amendment Competition and Consumer Bill to 2017 and the Telecommunications Regional Broadband Scheme Charge Bill 2017. Mr Acting Deputy President, these telecommunications bills before us today impose a $7.10 charge per month per premises on certain broadband wholesalers, excluding the NBN. This is a massive tax, representing more than a quarter of the wholesale price for broadband. This tax is designed to ensure a government-owned monolith, the NBN, can completely dominate a market, crushing small, privately owned businesses. Can anyone suggest what the position of the Liberal Democrats on this might be? I suspect you can, and in case you don't know, the Liberal Democrats are a low-tax party, and the Liberal Democrats believe that government businesses should be privatised so the rigours of competition can provide better services at lower cost without risk to taxpayers. So, obviously, the Liberal Democrats oppose this tax of $7.10 per month, designed to prop up a bumbling government-owned monolith. Unfortunately, the coalition government has been captured by the NBN, despite criticising the NBN when in opposition. Labor has criticised the coalition government about this $7.10 tax, but I fear that, at the end of the day, Labor, like a frazzled parent of a petulant child, will still feel that they must give the NBN whatever it wants. So, unfortunately, it seems that we will be stuck with this new tax of $7.10 per month. We need more Liberal Democrats in this place to hold back the folly and crony capitalism of the major parties, and to ensure that more money stays in the pockets of everyday Australians.
Senator Polley.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. I rise to speak on the Telecommunication Legislation Amendment, Competition and Consumer Bill 2018 and the Telecommunications Regional Broadband Scheme Charge Bill 2018. And I'd just like to acknowledge the National Students Leadership Forum for these wonderful young people that are here, who I'm sure will have a great deal of interest in these two pieces of legislation. These bills, which work in conjunction with each other, do two key things: legislate certainty that all premises in Australia can continue to access high-speed broadband infrastructure beyond the NBN rollout. This obligation already exists, but this gives it certainty, and Labor supports this. The second thing it does is introduce a telecommunications levy that will add $84 per year to bills of up to 400,000 consumers and businesses on the non-NBN network. Before moving on to the broadband levy, I wish to note Labor supports Schedule 3 of this bill. The proposed statutory infrastructure scheme will provide certainty that we move beyond the initial NBN rollout in 2021. The community will continue to have certainty about its ability to get access broadband services at their new home or business. Schedule 3 largely codifies an existing obligation that already exists in the NBN Statement of Expectations. Labor supports this and considers it to be a sensible and natural step. In contrast to the original commitment by Labor in 2009, was historically significant, particularly for regional and rural communities. A national broadband network was established to ensure every Australian would have access to high-speed broadband, irrespective of where they lived or worked. As a result, nearly 3 million homes and businesses across regional and rural Australia will have access to high-speed broadband, a sizable portion of which had no access to any broadband after 11 years of inaction under the Howard government. This was the single most important initiative to bridge the city-regional divide when it came to broadband in this country. Labor is proud of this achievement, and those who supported it in the Senate should be as well. On the other hand, the government has nothing to be proud of in terms of what we uncovered last week. Last week, before a joint standing committee into the National Broadband Network, the NBN Co admitted plans to charge regional Australians on the fixed wireless network $20 more per month than a customer on the same 50 megabyte speed who lived in the city. Simply put, a regional consumer could pay 44% more than someone in the city for the same 50 megabyte speed under this plan. This is an extra $65 per month or $240 a year that regional consumers would have to fork out. This is how this government views regional Australia. It takes them for granted. It doesn't view them as important as the city dwellers. And where were the Nationals on this? Sitting on their hands as usual. The Nationals, as we all know, are the doormats for the Turnbull government. They were quite happy to sit there and let regional Australia pick up the bill for the Prime Minister's NBN mess. They come in here and cry crocodile tears, but do nothing when it comes to standing up for regional Australia on these important issues. 2 hours after Labor called on the government to drop its regional broadband price hike, NBN Co reversed its decision, and so they should. And the ABC has also revealed that the NBN sought to modify a record of their own opening statement to the committee on their website to include passages that were not in the original statement and were not spoken by the NBN executives. The minister has also been pretending that no decision was ever made. In fact, he has claimed that consultation on the pricing changes were ongoing. The minister's argument began falling apart on Friday when an IT news article citing documents belonging to the NBN Co noted that the $20 per month increase was presented to the telecommunications industry as a done deal, not as something under consultation. IT article also noted that the regional broadband price hike was due to come into effect on the 20th of August. That was this week. Had it not been for Labor's regional consumers would be paying more. This could have been a disaster for my home state of Tasmania, where up to 40,000 households could have been slapped with an extra $20 per month just to order the same 50 megabyte service as someone who lives in the city. The intention of the NBN was always supposed to bridge the digital divide between regions and the cities, not to create a new one. We need